drawing Forsynthia from the Forsynthia Fits In series. I'm going to go over some of the tools I use, I'm going to go over some of the process, talk about the character development a little bit. So, let's see what I have in my tools here. So I have some pens here. These are drawing pens. These pens are by Prismacolor. They go by size. So you have a 005, a 01, a 03, a 05, and a 08. So the bigger they get, the fatter the pen is, and the smaller they get, they're made for detailing. I also have here something called micron pens. And again, we look at the tops here. Micron pens are organized according by number as well. So you have a 05, a 01, 005, 08, 03, you have your 02, and every artist will have their favorite one. The 08 is my finishing. Around every cartoon, you actually have the thickest line around the cartoon going around the edges. This is my finishing tool. So what I actually recommend is when you have your pens, test your tools. So let's see, this is a 02, so I'll make the 02 here, see what kind of marks those are making. All right, you can line that up there. Let's see what we have here. This is the 01, so this is getting one step finer. You can see what nice detail that's making. We've got our 005, so this is the finest of them all, and look at that. It's all so delicate, and when I'm drawing with these guys, I'm using a really, really, really light hand. Moving up to our 0, so we have a left 3, an 8, and a 5 left. So we'll do our 5. You can see how that's getting a little bigger. And as the pen gets bigger, the tip gets harder, so you can actually use it with a little bit more pressure and a little bit more heavy-handed. This is the 03. 03 is running out. That's probably why I have some of these. And then I have my 08, so the one that I use most of the time. There's my 08. And then likewise we have these Prismacolors, which will follow the same suit. So again, here's that 008 with Prismacolor. Very, very, very nice pen. It's a different feel. It's a different feel in the pen. Here's my 05. My 03. 03 is a great drawing pen. It's right in the middle. And here's my 005. Very fine detailed. And then coming again, I have my 01. So then I come back here again. These are very comparable pens, and I have them all tested, all laid out, so I'm ready to draw. Let's see what else I have in my tool bin here. I have 2 Sharpies. When I just want a very thick and deliberate line, when I'm trying to block something out, there's nothing like a Sharpie marker. So these are always great to have on hand, especially for concept drawing. Then you have this guy, which is a double-sided Sharpie. So this one has an even bigger tip, like watch that. And even if it's getting a little faded like this, that's great for sketching. You can do a lot with the Sharpie marker. Some artists work strictly in Sharpie, and it's actually very, very cool what they can come out with. The other side is this big guy. And again, these are big strokes. So this is actually something that, this marker is a little faded intentionally. I actually use this for a lot of shading. Here's my eraser. So this eraser is really great. It works like a mechanical pencil, and you just keep pumping the eraser out this end so that you can get really fine details. I do a lot of pencil work, a lot of pencil drawing, and this guy is amazing. The cool part is when this eraser runs out, you just put in a new one. And what else do I have in here? My standard eraser. And last but not least, for this particular drawing, I'm going to use mechanical pencils. I know this is crazy. It's not your typical drawing pencil by any means, but whenever I am doing the Forsynthia Fits In books, I use mechanical pencils for my first layer of drawing. I find that they have the control I want and the control I need to get what I want done. I do love the control that they provide. All right, let's get drawing. I'm going to use the yellow one because yellow is my favorite color. And let's see what we can do here. Forsynthia is a character that I developed in 2010, 2011. She's meant to be, the title is Forsynthia Fits In, drawing a character that represented everyone, every boy, every girl, from all over the place. No matter who you are, everybody has their share of problems. So I wanted to create a character that would reflect that. So what should this character look like? And after going through all the animals, I came up with Forsynthia the dragon. And one of these days I will find all of those drawings and I will show you guys. But Forsynthia is essentially has a smaller head and then a pear-shaped body. What we do is we draw an action line. So we're just going to draw Forsynthia standing. And you always start Forsynthia with her head shaped, and then you have her come down because she has a really nice long tail, so it doesn't actually matter how long you make this line. We're just going to make her standing and looking at us. She's a tiny neck, and then her belly comes out like this, and her back follows her tail. And you can see that's where we're making this nice long pear shape. Now, Forsynthia has a small little head, here's her pear-shaped body. We have another circle that goes on top representing her start of her leg. This is like her thigh area. And her leg actually has a few different parts. So we have her knee come out over here. We have her foot start to wrap around here. And then her foot bumps out right here again. That's her shoe. She has nice, pretty yellow shoes on all the time. And then this is the back of her foot here, the bottom of her shoe. And then we wrap around to her heel. And then it flips around again, and that creates the back of her leg. So this is just how Forsinthia's foot is made. Okay? Alright, so we have one leg made. This is her nice belly. Then we would see her other leg popping out over here, and we have the start of her next shoe right about there. And we can refine that as we go, but there's her feeties. Okay, so then we'll come up here. We can kind of rough in her arm. We'll decide what her arms are doing next. Forsynthia has little arms, kind of like a T-Rex style dragon, so littler arms. She's very capable, she can hold things, but they're not the biggest feature of her body. She's more bottom heavy. She's more bottom heavy down here. All right, let's talk about Forsinthia's head a little bit. So Forsynthia has two parts to her head. She has the little part up here that holds, basically if you picture it, this is where her mind, this is where her brain would be. And then she has, it always fans out, and she has her brow, which basically is at the very top of her head. And I always do that with just a little pointy angle. And this little shape here, this U holds her for her back eye. This comes out to create her snout, and then it flips back up into her nostril. Now, this is a really big, interesting point because when I'm drawing her mama dragon, Mama has a very long snout that comes out to here because as we age, if you notice, when you're little, your nose is nice and little and small, and as you get bigger, yeah, your nose gets a little bigger, your ears get a little bigger, your face gets a little longer. And so that's why Mama's drawn with a little bit longer of a face. But Forsynthia, she's little. So we're gonna draw her with a nice little delicate face. And that's why she comes out around here. Now we also want to make sure that her eyes are nice and evenly spaced and the right size. We need to make sure that her eye is an equal distance. If they're too far apart, and actually here we'll do this together. If they're too far apart or if they're not, like this is a very too steep of a curve here, it'll actually make her look a little harsher and a little less intelligent than she is if I make her eyes too far apart. If I make her eyes too slanted at the top there, it'll make her harsher looking as well. We want her earnest, we want her kind looking, so we want her eyes open and ready and positive and ready to take in the world. So we're gonna make their back eye there. We know the back eye is in the back, so it has to be smaller than the front eye. So when we're talking about shapes, we know that what's closer to us, we know in our minds as artists, what's closer to us has to be a little bit bigger. What's in the back is gonna be a little bit smaller. We have her eye, which sits right in here in her face, right? Sits right in there. And that is gonna be covered a little bit by the rest of her face shape. So that's gonna be a little bit different of a shape than her big eye right out here, right? And she's little, so she has really big eyes that we can have stare right out. Now the next thing for expression, when you think about expression, what changes on your face a lot? What changes on your face are a bunch of things, but your eyebrows. Okay, so when we think about expression, again, we think about eyebrows right up here. So we have actually this line here makes one eyebrow. This line here makes another, right? So we can see what she's starting to look like here. Now this eyebrow, I don't know if it's exactly the expression I want for today. And this is why it's a mechanical pen, because I kind of sometimes can decide, to be totally truthful, when I do expressions, I actually sit there with a giant mirror in my hand when I'm drawing, and I decide based on the story what's going on, or what expression I should be having, and I actually act out the whole thing right in the mirror. And what happens to the eyes? What happens to the eyebrows? And I actually hold the mirror while I'm drawing. So I hold the mirror in this hand and I draw with this hand, and that's how Forsynthia gets all of her facial expressions. But yes, the way I do that is a mirror. And it's actually my facial expressions that I'm echoing. So usually when I don't draw with a mirror, I've gotten with practice, I really get to know Forsynthia, and I can pretty much peg any facial expression just from thinking about it, because I've drawn her hundreds of times. And that's what it takes, drawing hundreds of times to get to know your character. But the main thing is that when you're trying to execute something, just like they did with Looney Tunes, with Mickey Mouse, animators today, you better believe that they're actors too. They're acting it out in the mirror, they're drawing it in front of them. Alright, so now I'm thinking, okay, well, what should Forsynthia be doing for her introduction here to drawing? Well, she's gonna be happy. She's a happy girl. We like Forsynthia for that reason. She's smiley, she's kind, she wants to be friends. We're gonna draw that. Here's her little cheek right there. Forsynthia has a nice ear that always comes out there. Then we have the top of her head, and the top of her head is actually kind of Goofy inspired. In this way, Disney Goofy inspired. She has like a two-part head. If you've ever drawn Goofy, you'll know that it's kind of a similar outlook. And then I just come and take this up here. Forsynthia always has her bow. Perfect. And her first spike is showing on the back of her head back here. Now, what am I forgetting? Alright, now, what am I forgetting? So now I'm looking at Forsynthia, and she's getting most of the way done, and here's what I'm thinking. The first thing is, Forsynthia has pigtails. So I block those in. I know that they're on top of her head, so I always just block those in afterwards. And then her pigtails change based on how she's feeling. So if she's happy, her pigtails are gonna be up and boisterous and fun. She's gonna have another one over here, and they're gonna be long. If Forsynthia is sad, we have like a sad dragon over this way, right? Make her have a frown here. We'll just give her a nice loose Forsynthia. Okay, if she's sad, her pigtails droop. Her bow droops a little bit too. Because that shows her expression. It shows that she's sad. It shows what she's thinking. If you notice, her cheeks will droop, her snout will droop, her all up here, her nostrils will droop. Everything will droop in a downward angle. When she's happy, just like the curve of her mouth faces upward, so do her pigtails. Everything is facing upward, okay? So same thing with her eyes. Now her eyes, depending on how we want to make her, if she's really smiling, we might show a little eyelid in here. We may just bring it in a little bit. Okay, so now we have Forsynthia. Now let's do an experiment. So I'm gonna just erase her eye, just so you can see a little bit of what's going on. Now you can really see what's happening here. We're gonna erase both eyes actually, just so you can see. All right, so we're gonna draw this eye back in a little bit closer to the center. Again, Forsynthia is very young, so we want to make sure that her eyes are nice and big. And we're going to make her eyes a little bit smaller. Just like this. And see what that does to her personality. See how that makes her look just a tiny bit older? We've aged Forsynthia by a couple of years just by making her eyes a little bit smaller. So the proportion from here to here, here to here, she's a little bit more mature with her eyes that big. Pretty interesting. Okay, So now let's finish this up. Now for Cynthia's neck, the way I have her here, would actually come and start right over here. So we're just going to continue the body down this way, and we'll just make that adjustment as we go. So for Cynthia's neck comes out in that nice little V. And we're going to have to move her foot back. Usually I've drawn this out of order here. Well, that's okay. We're learning, right? So you can see how I'm kind of shaping, just as like if you picture, I don't know if any of you guys have ever worked with clay, but you can really kind of mold a character on the page just like you would mold something in real life. And let's see what I want her to do with her hand. So arms have two parts, right? Well, including your hand. You have your hand, your forearm, and then the top of your arm. So that's the same thing here. Here's for Cynthia's shoulder, so I usually circle it out, right? Here's the main part of her arm. It's connected by her elbow. Then her elbow is connected into her forearm, and then we'd have a hand in here. Now if she's waving to us, we could do that. We could have her waving. We could have her thumb in there. We could have her nice palm. There we go. There we go. Perfect. So now we have her waving. And again, these proportions here is a little bit longer of an arm, making for Cynthia a little bit more mature. So now we have for Cynthia that's in elementary school as opposed to preschool. Now this arm, depending on how I'm drawing for Cynthia, again, her shoulders are part of her descriptive feeling and her descriptive emotion. So this arm needs to be hiding right behind here. Now that you can hopefully see that better now that I remove some of the other excess. But I don't want her shoulders overly popping out. What I want to try to do is really show you this angle here, right? So that I can just have her other arm kind of just hanging out on the side of her body. Figured this is kind of for Cynthia's posture. So when she's just hanging, she just kind of, has her hand. Usually for Cynthia, could also have her backpack on. That's a typical. For Cynthia, could also have her back. Typical for Cynthia. Her entire first book, she's usually wearing her backpack. For Cynthia, has her belly. And then it's coming down. Now look, she has like all these feet. Series 1, 2, 3, 4 different feet. Which one are her feet? We'll figure that out in just a second. I'm not too worried. And her tail, if you think about her tail, it has to logically work. So her tail has to balance her. It's kind of like a third leg. So her tail is something that couldn't be overly big, because otherwise it would knock her over, right? Can't be overly long, because that would be a symbol of an adult. For something young, for someone young like for Cynthia, she'd actually have a tail that was developing too, just like her nose, her ears, her pigtails, everything's gonna be a little bit smaller. So we like to draw for Cynthia like this. There's where her body would end. There's her tail, and she has a tiny up curve, because again, why do we point it up? Because she's happy. So we point her tail up a little bit because she's feeling happy today. And there you go. Okay, very good. So let's get rid of some of this so you guys can see this at home. Get rid of some of this excess. Again, we don't want that foot in there. We don't want any of this stuff. We can move her foot back a little bit. And let's see. Again, you work with these circles because then it just gives you a shape to draw around. That's why you always see artists flexing their circles here, because then if I want a nice, we call it an ellipse, but if we want a nice curve here around our circle or elliptical shape, you couldn't get that because you're just essentially tracing your own hand. So for Cynthia's shoe is essentially one circle, and then you have the main part of her shoe followed by the buckle portion coming around to her heel. And that's how we get her shoe. And then she has some polka dots in here with her knee, but we're going to show how to draw that right here. So for this one, take away some of that old shoe, as we're going to make her standing up a little taller. Now the whole thing is, what I'm looking at is that original line that I made, and I'm also kind of taking a step back when I'm drawing and saying, okay, so now here's for Cynthia. Now, if I draw her foot here, could she possibly be something that stood up? Her weight is going to be distributed here. So now where does her other foot need to rest? So when I'm drawing this one, what I'm actually looking for, guys, is where does this foot need for her to stand? So you can do something. Stand up and kind of let your weight tip you back so you just kind of fall over. Now, you'll notice that your one foot will catch yourself. So that's where your foot needed to be to help you not fall over. So your feet have a natural way of standing so that it maintains your balance. It's the same thing with a cartoon. You know something's off. You, the viewer, know something's off if the artist draws the cartoon wrong. That's not possible, and even though you may not be able to tell me why, you may be able to think, well, if you looked hard enough, that maybe they're not standing up the right way. So now we know her tail's not gonna knock her over, her feet are lining up, and she is basically developed. We'll just draw on her belly here, and then eventually we're gonna be drawing in her polka dots, so on and so forth. And she's looking good. Okay, just don't want to forget here. For Cynthia, we always draw some eyelashes. 05, 08. Yeah, this one's good. This one's a little bit more beefy. Now her nostril shouldn't be that big, so I'm actually gonna correct as I go. Follow this curve down. For Cynthia has a little bit of it's a top lip right here. That's that little bump. Then she comes down, whoop, and around, and this is her next one. This thing can be very thick because I want people to see that smile, and her smile is a very defining feature. So there's that. Come back around, it's no problem. Make this nice and thick too. Okay, now we're gonna drop down. Make her have a little bit more bigger smile here, like she's kind of laughing. Right, open that up. Now because I opened her smile this way, her cheek's gonna bulge up a little bit more. Good, follow that down so she has enough room for her mouth to be in. This distance needs to fit her entire mouth. Finish that up. So there's her mouth behind there. Okie dokie. Now what we'll do is we'll come in and do this eye. Now this eye needs to be a little bit shorter. There's her eyeball. Boom, boom, boom. We'll give her some eyelashes. So we know what she's feeling, right? Get her ear going. Now again, guys, if I was gonna draw this for a final, what I'd actually do is I could actually put a piece of tracing paper over and draw my black on a separate sheet so that when I lifted it up, I have my underdrawing underneath, I have my final on top. The other thing is when I do a lot of these final black drawings, depending on what I'm doing, I actually do this part in the computer. So I actually use something called a Wacom tablet and an application called Adobe Photoshop, and I actually do my black lining actually right in the computer on a different layer so that it never intersects. I always love a good pen and ink. It's always a good exercise as an artist to draw on all mediums of your character as possible. In there. I'm going to shorten this up a little bit. I'm going to change the shape. I didn't like that shape very much. I'm going to shorten this up because I think that she should have a little bit shorter pigtails, a little bit more descriptive, right? 3 is always better for when you're drawing. 3s and 5s always work whenever you're pairing. If you get a 4th in there, for some reason your eye just says, oh, that's awkward. So working in groups of 3s and 5s rather than 4s is a very strategic thing to do. Good, there's her last spike. Okay. We will start her neck coming down here so that I could hold her head up. Again, you want your eye to be able to say, oh yeah, that neck could hold that head up. So that's what I'm thinking there. And then the shoulder can come down, and the shoulder is going to be held by her backpack strap. So we're actually going to do that first so that we know exactly where that backpack is going. And come around, and her elbow should start a little bit higher from where I have it. And there's her arm. There we go. She's looking lovely. There, very good. Okay. For Cynthia's hands, I try to leave extremely simple, having all the major components. So you have knuckles, which leads to these first part of your fingers, right? Then you have this part of your fingers. Then you have this part of your fingers. You have your hand, right? You have your wrist, and then here. So a lot of parts. And your hands, guys, are so much expression. That's why people say, talk with your hands. It tells you exactly what you're thinking. So when you draw a character, it's really important to not leave any of that out, especially with the thumb. If you have the thumb facing the wrong way, it just messes up your whole hand. So hands are something that you can study for a long time. In your first few years of college, if you go to art school, you actually spend a lot of time going over just how descriptive hands are. It's a very, very, very important topic. All right. Your backpack. You guys have learned today that my favorite color is yellow. That is why she has yellow shoes and yellow backpack. For the heck of it, I'll show you. So where Sharpie can come and play. We'll actually do the rest of Forsynthia with this. There are parts of her with this, so you can see while this black line develops and might go a little faster here. Fine. Very nice. That's looking good. That's nice and crisp. Hopefully you guys can see that from the camera really well. So again, we'll get that suggestion of her shoulder. The thing with Sharpies is if I let my Sharpie rest on the page, it does something called bleed. If I tap really quickly, it's nice and small. But if I let it rest, see how big it gets really fast? Look at the difference between those two. Same tip, just held down. So Sharpies are tricky because you actually have to draw pretty confidently in order to make them work. But it takes some practice, like everything else. And if you have the wrong paper, like this paper that I'm using is pretty thick. It's pretty thick drawing paper, so it can take a lot of moisture. But if you're using a different kind of paper, like the moisture can actually expand in totally different ways. So sometimes it's not that you're even doing the wrong thing with your Sharpie marker. It's just that you have a different kind of paper that's harder to control, or maybe for a different type of medium. All right, let's see what we're doing here. As I'm going, what I'm seeing is where I need thicker black lines so that you can actually pay attention. The other difference is that this black marker, now that I started using it, is a totally different black than those microns and those Prismacolors that I was using. So now I gotta go over things to make it look just as significant. Because the Sharpie is a very true black, so a lot of graphic designers like it for doing ideas. Probably could have gone a little bit bigger on that shoe, but that's okay. Again, this is just a study. Good practice. So she has her belly. Nice round belly there. That's the part. Okay, that's her belly there. Come here. Okay. There's her coolie area. And come back there. Okay, she's looking good, guys. Now, there's one more thing that I didn't draw. Oh, and here's what I'm doing, by the way. Anytime you have an under part, you can actually make your line bigger, because that shows where it's going under. So that gives me a more substantial line. Also, do you see how this line for her tail follows her stomach up? This kind of makes a nice logical curve. So your eye accepts it. It seems like, oh yeah, that's right. But that's why you're doing that. It seems like, oh yeah, that's exactly how it should be. Yes, it is. that stomach a little bit more substantial. This arm is our outline, so we want that more substantial. Here's her backpack. We can make that the right black. You don't want to lose this jaw here and make it seem like it's falling behind. So very carefully, we're actually just gonna edit this a little bit. Go in here and just change our blacks. Very good. Okay, she's looking good. So I'm forgetting only a couple things. First is, Forsynthia needs some polka dots. And when I was working on designing a character, there's a lot of things, whether it's complexion, whether it's the color of our skin, whether it's a birthmark, whether it's something we have going on, whether we have braces. Everybody has something different going on. So Forsynthia has her different thing. She has a lot of polka dots. Unlike any other kid in her grade, she's got the polka dots. So that's why she has those. Okay. Very good. She's looking good. There's one last thing that I didn't talk about, and those are her spikes. Forsynthia does have spikes, just like any good dragon has. And like we were talking about with how sad she is, if her spikes, just kind of get us a background here. If she's sad, her spikes are sad. If she's angry, her spikes are more pointed. If she's happy, and if she's just normal, her spikes have this kind of oblong shape that are just kind of non-threatening, just spikes. They are what they are. She's a dragon. The other kind of variable item that I add to her, depending on how I think she's feeling, are her little tiny teeth. But that makes Forsynthia the dragon complete from start to finish. All right, so last thing. What's today? Today is 11/24/2014. Now guys, anytime you're sketching in your sketchbook, this is something my mom always taught me. If you can, remember to date things in your sketchbook, and then this is the last thing. Sign it or initial it. So you'll see a lot of artists do this one, where it's just, so my name is Rachel Alyssa DiNunzio, so that's an R-A-D. That's why I'm called Studio Radish. But the R-A-D are my initials, and then the 14 with this little guy here. So you see a lot of artists do that because it's nice and simple, and guys, that kind of looks cool too. But then you have your signature as well. Either one works, but the reason why we do this is because, first of all, this is your work, this is your drawing, you should take ownership of it. The other reason is that it is really cool to see your work grow, and it's really cool to see your signature grow. I have this same signature that I've been developing since I've been really young. I used to sit there with papers, just write my name over and over and over. My mom and I used to sit there with my brother and we used to practice how we were gonna write our name. And that's how I figured out how I liked to do this art. But yeah, it actually took thought, and now it's just second nature to sign my name this way. I like my art, that's how I do it. But yeah, so practice your signature, make it you, make it an extension of you. It's an opportunity to show who you are and express who you are in something that you're gonna write countless times. Every artist signs her work. Thank you so much for watching How to Draw Forsynthia, and we'll see you soon.